Okay, here it is. Releasing pain. Is it possible to release pain without crying? For example, being depressed or being in pain but not crying. So the thought that came to mind is you can be in pain when the depression is pain, you know, all that stuff is pain, but releasing it, I think, is mostly, I mean, it's like 90% of it is crying. But so she said, for example, depressed. Now I know that that feeling of depressed, like you just feel low, why am I living? My life is meaningless. Nothing is going my way. I just want to disappear. That feeling, so let me share a little bit. When I couldn't cry and something in my life would trigger me, like right, like I'm a failure, I'm a loser, I see somebody that has what I want and I couldn't cry. It was impossible. That would hit me. So some deep pain was coming up and I just couldn't cry. I didn't even know that that was a thing. And so I could be depressed all day. So all day I'd have that feeling of like, I don't want to live anymore. My life is horrible. And slowly, right, this process was so painful. As I was able to cry, eventually there was a point where that the same thing could happen to me. I was living my life, something would trigger me. I would feel that depressing feeling, oh, here it is. I almost, maybe feeling a little bit suicidal. And then when I was able to just start sobbing, right, just admit to myself I'm in so much pain and I just want to cry, the depression would be gone. Like right after crying, maybe I was crying for 10 minutes, I don't know. Once it was over, I could feel that that energy was just gone. The depression was gone. It didn't come back until maybe the next trigger. And so what I was also going to say is, so is it possible to release pain without crying? I think that there's sort of like three types of, I don't even know if, yeah, pain or energy in the body, which is whatever makes you cry, which is usually sadness, grief. Then there's anger and rage, which is very different to getting emotional because you just want to do something, right? And then the last one I think is the most rare, which is just fear in the body. And the way that I feel fear in the body nowadays is just through a long meditation. Like after a certain amount of time, 45 minutes, an hour, my body will just literally get goosebumps of fear. I just feel some fear in the body for a second. It comes in waves sometimes. But I would say, just to finish that, ultimately, everything will lead to crying because it's almost like, even anger, like anger leads to crying because I see anger and rage as a kind of fight with what's going on. And when you extinguish all of that fighting energy, you just start crying because you see that the fighting didn't do anything. So an example is you may have a memory, so something of your childhood, somebody hurt you, your father, your mother. That already happened, right? It's done. It can't be fixed. Your father's not going to change in that moment or your mother. And so if there's a huge amount of rage, how dare he have abused me like that? Then maybe in your mind, you're almost wanting to hurt him or you're even killing him in your mind. Once all of that rage is gone, crying is going to happen because you realize that all of the fighting didn't change the past. The past is what it was. And so I think really it just comes all back to crying. And the last thing I want to say is the reason why I think you're asking that is because obviously it's still not completely effortless. And so there might be a kind of confusion like, is it just crying or is there something else? And as it becomes easier and easier, you're going to see that ultimately everything goes back to crying.
Yeah, definitely. Um, I think it becomes very clear that crying is the bodily function of releasing repressed emotion, much like anything else. Again, it's not special, it doesn't have special spiritual powers. It's like any other thing, eating, um, any other bodily function you can think of. It's the same. And I think, to be succinct as well, I think the answer is just no. But the ego or whatever, well, it's very confusing to not be able to see that clearly. Um, and yeah, depression is just the symptom of repressed emotion.
Yeah.
It's not, depression is not a release of sadness. or it's not a release. It itself is not a release. It's a state in which repressed emotion puts you in. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Um, so I'm just gonna go because I think we still have some time. I like this question. So this is another question from Beata. She says, going deeper. Um, my purging has significantly decreased. Ego layers are very subtle and way harder to detect. How does one go deeper on the awakening journey? Thank you. So I think the what will be most relatable is just meditation. So I'll just say it. So the meditation, psychedelics, I think most people won't go out there and buy psychedelics, but definitely psychedelics. Um, and I just want to say, don't take too much. Be very, very careful of how much you take because it can be something that you can't even imagine is that difficult. And I think the final thing would be, and then I want to talk a little bit about meditation, not medication, meditation is the other thing you can do is literally look for things that will trigger you, which is kind of a funny thing. So it's like if here's an example of something that used to trigger me, and then for a while I was like avoiding it. Um, Videos of people having arguments, right? Like on the street and in a restaurant, that would make my heart rate go, I was like literally feeling unsafe. And after a long time of avoiding, I finally said, wait a minute, maybe I should just face this and just watch and watch as many as possible. And so anything that you think would trigger you, like it could be any video you can imagine, situations in life, speaking to people. Um, I'm trying to think of one. I forgot it, but it was funny. It was like, um, I mean, anything, even something when you're just alone, something that's out of your comfort zone, which could be exploring rage more. I mean, anything that you can feel is like new territory. That will make it, come up.
Yeah, and it's kind of like a more time spent in these states, the more you access and the deeper you go. So, but again, I'm not sure it's something that can be forced necessarily. You might feel drawn to meditation, a longer meditation. And when we talk about meditation, we mean rest, being in a environment where you don't have distractions and allowing what comes to come. You can, I suppose, try to place your attention on your bodily sensation. Of course, you'll notice the endless activity of the mind, but there's no goal. There's no goal of doing anything. And enough time spent alone in this state of rest, things will come up and come. Um, but you'll know what's right for you. But I think that, and then as Steve said with the hallucinogenics, but I think we've both had very distressing experiences with high doses. So maybe not the best, guides for that. But all those saying, our experiences have been very critical to the journey. But the lesson learned was certainly controlled small amounts in which you're able to. It's like meditation, just but really concentrated. Like the things that come up just come up in a much more concentrated, condensed fashion.
Yeah. And I was gonna say that it is interesting. So like she said, ego layers are very subtle and way harder to detect. It's so interesting how this stuff happens in the mind because, nowadays, to describe my experience, it's very interesting. It's like um, I could be walking in the park. And this is kind of funny to say. I could be walking in the park, and the way that I'm experiencing my vision and everything, it's like my ego wants to say, "Wow, this is almost completely enlightened." And then usually in the park, I have a really strong release of I go into the forest and I just sob every day. It's like a different thing. And so I can feel this like love that people would call divine. It's not divine, but it's this like unbelievable love. And then I'll just step back on the trail where people are walking. And after like feeling this like unbelievable unconditional love, I could just feel rage that somebody like, like crossed my path or something. And without them seeing, I just like say something horrible. And then after that, I'm just back to just looking at the park and everything and feeling blissful. And so the journey is so long and there are so many layers to go through that even when you feel that you've, gone very deep, there's more and more. And I think that once once you start to experience a big change where you're like, wow, for the first time in my life, I'm feeling this, then you almost get an appetite for going deeper. And this is a very weird thing that happens because when I meditate, I'm literally meditating, sometimes just to rest, but it literally to pull up more pain. And when I do, like I did it 2 days ago, an hour and a half, I literally feel, like you said the ego layers are very subtle. Well, they become like they don't bec that suddenly it's there, and then there's more anger and there's more I could, be triggered and then I have to cry. And if I didn't meditate, it would be more soft. And so there's almost this weird game of like, what if I just never meditated again and just enjoyed this, whatever stage I'm on? But I know that I'm not free. I can see it all the time. And so I meditate to pull up the pain, to release it. And that's just you just keep going, right?
Did you want to do one of Sienna's? I know we
Yeah.
kind of
Oh
addressed
yeah,
it,
this is
but
this is
yeah.
an interesting one. Yeah. Okay, so this is Sienna's question.